Good afternoon, welcome to my EcoBUZZ. This is Judging a Tree by its Cover, Part 1. In this week's post, I'm going to give you a little intro to some winter tree identification. Usually we look at the leaves first as a way to identify the trees around us, but obviously in Michigan, that's not always possible during the winters. So luckily there are a few other things that we can use to help us ID the trees, and those include the tree's outer covering or bark. Also the buds are helpful, as well as the tree branching pattern, which can be opposite or alternate. And then finally, the habitat is also helpful because sometimes you have trees that may look similar, but they occur in very different habitats. So all of those things I will try to bring in examples of in this week's post and then next time as well. The first tree that I want to point out to you this week is right here behind me. This is the black cherry, and I don't know how easy it is to see in the video, but compared to the other trees around it in the forest, the black cherry has bark that is a lot darker. Hence the name black cherry, but the bark also has these small sections all over it that are really peely and kind of pulling off of the tree a little bit. To me, I like to say that it looks like burnt frosted flakes or burnt potato chips. So really distinct and recognizable once you see it. You don't really even need to look at the buds. But this is a tree that you'll find in upland, more dry forests, and also in mesic or moister forests. Okay, so that's the black cherry. Now, oaks can be a little bit more tricky to distinguish from other trees in the forest based solely on their bark, so you sometimes have to use other clues as well. But right here next to me is an example of a red oak tree, and you can see that the bark is ridged, but they're very shallow ridges, and the tops are flattened, so and they're pretty stuck up against the tree. They're not peeling off like in the sugar maple or the black cherry. And if you look deep into the ridges here, you can even see kind of an orangish or reddish coloration in there, so that gives you a tip that it's a red oak. Thankfully, oaks tend to hold on to their leaves a little bit into the winter, so if you see up in the branches that there's some leaves left, or you can look on the ground below the tree and try to figure out which ones maybe came from the tree here. But this is an example of a red oak leaf, so the edges are pointed rather than rounded. Okay. An example of a white oak would be right behind me here. You can see that we have flattened ridges on this tree as well, rather than bark that peels off in like shingle-like shapes. So another thing with the white oak is that as you're looking through the forest, it has a lighter color, so more gray or whitish than other trees around it, hence the white oak. And again, it also helps if there are leaves left on the branches to be able to tell you what it is. I'm also looking down here on the ground. Here's a white oak leaf right here, so it's got rounded lobes or rounded tips. Okay, so if you see that predominantly on the ground underneath the tree, then you've got a white oak. All right, the next tree that I want to point out to you, again, is in an upland forest here. This is the American beech. So the beech tree is usually pretty recognizable as well, often because, unfortunately, people use these trees to carve their initials in because of the really smooth bark. But this tree has very smooth gray bark. I like to tell kids that it looks kind of like an elephant foot. And oftentimes there are darker markings on the branches or on the trunk where the branches were, or where it has been scarred in the past. So you can kind of tell from that, but very distinctive bark. American beech trees also tend to hang on to their leaves into the winter, just like this one is right here, especially the younger trees. So these leaves have this nice light tan orangey color. Another thing you can look at to tell you that it's an American beech are the buds on the tips of the branches. So right here you can see that these buds are really long and slender and very pointy on the end. So that's really distinctive for this tree. None of the other trees in this habitat have buds like that. So that's pretty distinct for the American beech. Alright, so that wraps us up this week for part 1 of judging a tree by its cover. I hope you enjoyed getting out and exploring a little bit. Now it's your turn, so go out and practice some of these trees. And part 2 will be coming up in a few weeks. Alright, thanks for joining me. Happy naturing!